Hey everybody, welcome to a new installment of the Comic DeSPECtive. This is something new we're trying. You see a change of locale. I'm down in the sausage factory, if you will. And I know some people don't like to show how the sausage is made, but here at the Comic DeSPECtive, I think that's what we're all about. Sort of talking about what's the process for finding the books that are going to yield the most profit, and ones that you have to sort of lay out the least for. I know that I've spoken a little bit in the past about I've been a long time collector. I don't think I've ever really gone into that much detail about my own history with comics, but I was a long time buyer starting back around the time of Secret Wars, Uncanny X-Men. I was right around the time of that Paul Smith run where John Romita Jr. took over. I know there are a lot of JR Jr. haters out there, but for me, I equate a lot of the Uncanny X-Men I read and a lot of the Amazing Spider-Man with his art, and at that time it was really dynamic for me. And I understand that over the years, his style has seemed sort of blocky and old-fashioned to many, but I think if we saw some of the work that he recently did on the Silencer, that the old J.R. Jr. is still in there, and I think it's well worth for many people who are not fans to go back and read some of those classic runs. But anyway, this is sort of where I keep all of the boxes that I've collected over the last 30 years or so. They're all sort of behind me, lined up over here, over there. There's stuff lined up in these cases that were here in my house when I bought them. But this is where I do a lot of the digging of things that I think may be of potential interest down the line. And I thought it'd be interesting if I started a segment that I'm going to call the Underground DeSPECtive. And it's sort of how are we pulling these books out, or how am I pulling these books out? Because I am a one-man sort of team here. How am I pulling these books out, and what am I sort of looking for as I do that? And I thought I'd go through that process and show a few books tonight. The first book I'm going to show you is definitely not one that you'll find buried in dollar boxes or forgotten unbagged piles of books. But it is one that I think is undervalued, and I wanted to bring it up because we've seen Brian Michael Bendis tweeting a lot lately about the Legion of Superheroes. I believe he started it out with he showed a shot from maybe like Pinky from Grease or raising her sunglasses, and then down below a shot of the Legion of Superhero flight ring. There was a shot of the Lego Legion. Then he went on and showed my favorite version, the 5 Year Later Legion by Tom and Mary Bierbaum and Keith Giffen. Very controversial Legion of Superheroes run, as it took these familiar teen characters and flashed them forward into a very dark future. And as someone who came onto the Legion late, I sort of had to piece it together, almost like a detective story. So again, I count that Legion of Superheroes love for a lot of what I do today with the Comic DeSPECtive, of sort of tracing back what came before. And to that, I think really one undervalued book is Action Comics 276. This is, of course, the introduction of many, apart from the original three big Legion. So we previously had Cosmic Boy, Lightning Lad, and Saturn Girl all introduced. But this is where we got to see Phantom Girl, Sun Boy, Triplicate Girl, or Triplicate Lass, Bouncing Boy, and Brainiac 5. So all characters that became a huge part of the Legion lore and Legion legend. This was approximate graded. I'll cover up, I guess, who sold it, but at a 6.0 approximately, and it says 150. I think I ended up getting it for $90. Again, people are paying an insane amount of money for the first appearance of these Agents of Atlas characters, and we have a great key here. Action Comics 276, an undervalued book. Legion of Superheroes is coming back. Brian Michael Bendis is going to do something with it that is definitely going to take the book, I'm sure, very much more into the public eye than it's been throughout its many incarnations, and there have been many runs of the Legion, and I think one of the reasons it does not do well is because they sort of have to cater to the old audience and also bring in a new audience, and that old audience happens to be very fussy about what they're getting. There was a lot of kickback on that 5 year later Legion, but as someone who came into there, I never really had a problem with it. But jumping from that Legion book, again, an undervalued book, another book that had a lot of first appearances is Avengers: The Initiative. This gave us Cloud9. This gave us Sarge Gauntlet, who is the leader of this Avengers: The Initiative series. This gave us Komodo. This gave us Armory, Hardball. Lot of first appearances in this book. This was printed in large numbers. Of course, this was a huge undertaking for Marvel. They had its own ongoing series, but this was the one shot. It was 50-50 covers by Jim Chung, who I'm always a big fan of. I think I really like his character work. But this was a cover with, of course, Ms. Marvel, and the other cover had Iron Man on it. But again, a lot of first appearances, big print run, but first appearances, when you're looking for them, you never know who's going to pop. There were a lot in this book, and these are really easy to find and dig up. Another thing I really like to go after are covers. I have a big PC of covers I love, and when I find really, really nice copies, I'll get them slabbed. Someone who, one character that has had a lot of runs of books that have not been really successful, but someone who's had a lot of great cover artists is She-Hulk. This is, of course, Greg Horn on yet another reboot, but this was numbered She-Hulk 100 when I think it was issue 3. Again, these are all dollar box grabs. Just looking when you can buy beautiful Greg Horn covers. Better days for Eros there before pre-Thanos, I guess. Nice Shield Steranko sort of homage from the Planet Without a Hulk sort of crossover. Adi Granov did some really popular ones. I think 5 is the one everybody knows the most. Those get grabbed up. They've definitely been posterized and t-shirted, of course, sort of busting through some concrete, but whenever you can get a dollar cover of She-Hulk and Spidey, I'll take that for $1. And then one of the more recent runs, Deodato, who I think is really underrated. I think a lot of people don't get how his style is really apes on sort of the 90s 90s sort of style, and he's taken his own sort of riff on this, but he does some really outstanding action shots, and I think here's another one that you can see really clearly on and again, a lot of these She-Hulk covers are homage covers. That was issue 24 of She-Hulk, but again, dollar buys. I want to talk about a series or 4 that are definitely way under the radar. They're available in dollar boxes all over. I pulled them out of. I tend to keep my minis together. I tend to keep one-shots together. I tend to keep these future versions of Marvel and DC Universe stuff together as well, just because it makes it easier to dig when I'm looking for things. But a series that I had read but I'd never owned was The Crew. This was an attempt by Christopher Priest, who a lot of you know from Quantum and Woody probably, and an artist that's gotten a lot of acclaim lately with his run on The Immortal Hulk, Joe Bennett. They sort of took Rhodey and they broke Rhodey down. It was a down and out Rhodey, and he was putting this sort of The Crew together. Don't mistake this for the second coming of The Crew, which was Black Panther and Storm and a lot of the characters that have that were much more bigger profile. This was Rhodey, sort of post-war machine. And again, these covers are these are J.H. Williams covers. This was White Tiger, Kevin Cole, not the White Tiger that a lot of you know. Pops up in Daredevil now and then. And again, these. So we talked. Joe Bennett did the art in these. Pretty amazing. This is, I believe, Josiah X. He went by Isaiah Bradley, the Black Captain America, his son. And these are all dollar pickups. Again, you can pull a whole series out of a lot of these series, and the worst that's going to happen is you're going to spend less than it would cost for the trade to get the original books, and you can at least get a great read out of them. And if anything ever happens with these books, who knows? Mini from Image Comics by Nathan Edmondson and Tonche Zonjic, who's an artist very much in the style of, I guess, Michael Lark. This was Who is Jake Ellis? Really nice sort of uh, maybe Memento-ish type mystery, but a character sort of discovering who he is throughout. Very short series. I find these 5-issue series easy to collect, easy to find all together as well, because people tend to buy those series up and then sell them and not just have issue 3 or 4. Again, I guess what all these have in common, From the Crew only ran 7 issues. Who is Jake Ellis was meant to be a 5-issue series. Another one that was kind of short was Captain Britain and MI13. I've spoken a lot about this. This was spun out of Secret Invasion. So if Marvel decides to go the Secret Invasion route next, you could definitely see them wanting to put Captain Britain, this UK team out there, Black Knight, Pete Wisdom, depending who they want to get involved in this. I think Captain Britain and Black Knight alone are enough to sort of to get some people in the seats. But this whole run was sort of a supernatural and sort of sci-fi tone. So a lot of vampire things. That's Spitfire. Union Jack might be an interesting character to get involved in here as well. Dracula ended up being the sort of the antagonist throughout a lot of the series as well. I think I actually pulled one of those covers, my favorite cover from that run. That's a great cover. I think it's Leonard Kirk. But there's a great cover of Dracula just sort of on a pile of bodies, and I pulled that one out to get slabbed, actually, because that's one of my favorite. And as a fan of Excalibur and a fan of, an Anglophile in general, this is a series I really enjoyed reading about. This was the last one, the annual Greg Land cover featuring Megan, the shapeshifter, and erstwhile Captain Britain love interest that was in Excalibur. So that's something that could pop up down the line, and again, cheap buy-in. There are second and third printings of that first issue. I think I've shown the third printing before. Very, very hard to find, so if that did pop, you'd want to look for those as well. But it's nice to sort of sell these runs and whole runs, and you can easily put them together. So Scott Snyder is someone who's sort of, for me, polarizing. I liked a lot of his early stuff. I, of course, was very into his Batman run, and now I think he keeps trying to play sort of a game of top this. I'm sort of seeing now, though, in Justice League, I'm getting into his Justice League run. I'm interested to see where he's going next. What's going to happen this summer will tell a lot of that. His earlier runs, his American Vampire book has gotten a lot of attention, but another series that picked up a lot of critical acclaim, and to me, when I see this sometimes, I think of that Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water. Some of the designs out of this book make me very much think of that. But the book is called The Wake, and this was by Scott Snyder and the brilliant Sean Murphy, who did Batman White Knight. Again, this was a 10-issue run. Sort of halfway through the series, it shifts radically. I'm not going to spoil this if you haven't read it, but it is more than just a discovery of the deep sort of horror tale. It tells the story of a scientist, and then it morphs into a totally different series you won't expect. I think they had 2 issues of those. I grabbed one of those copies. I tend to find I get a lot of doubles of stuff. I never know what to do with it. But this was a series that could really easily be adapted into a mini. It could be just a 1 season, but it would also make a great movie or a couple movies, a planned sort of trilogy. It would work really well with when you read sort of the formatting of this book. Again, books that could be acquired on the cheap, books that you may have, and these are really great to find. You can find these in perfect condition. These might be really vintage if Vertigo disappears, as many have rumored. Could be happening. But it's just a rumor as of now. Last thing I want to read. This is just a great read. If you're like me, you've been disappointed with what's been going on with Nightwing lately. I don't know what's going on with this Rick Grayson. It's really annoying. But this Nightwing series, this was the end of, or maybe Chuck Dixon came back on for a run for this and did it with Scott McDaniel. Again, someone who I really identify with his Nightwing run. But this was sort of the Nightwing year one, right after issue 100. I think in between the Devin Grayson run that I really wasn't a fan of. We have Chuck Dixon doing what he does best and sort of telling us the story of this, of how Nightwing sort of became who he was. And we've seen a lot of these year one style stories, but I think it was really fitting and a really nice tribute to this character's history. A character who I don't think DC knows what to do with, just sort of like Wally West, whatever they're doing with him. I blame you, Tom King. Again, acquire cheaply, buy it up, don't spend a lot on it, and who knows where you may come along. Typhoid Mary, another character. I know a lot of people were buying up that Daredevil run. It's just a cheap. I found these. I think these were actually maybe $1.50 each I spent for these. Just the Typhoid run of Typhoid Mary and Nascenti, who had a classic Daredevil run. Some really interesting Van Fleet art on here as well, sort of that abstract quality. Not quite Bill Sienkiewicz level. I'll show you what it sort of looks like, just so you get an idea. A lot of this sort of, silhouettes, cut out, sort of really interesting color work. But a great series to sort of redefine Typhoid Mary, character who could be a really interesting love interest, depending what happens with the street level Marvel heroes with the Netflix series all coming under. Final things I wanted to show is I tend to go through magazine boxes a lot. And as I'm going through these magazine boxes, you always find a lot of things because, one, people don't go through magazine boxes. Another series that would really be a great fantasy to see sort of presented on the screen. It's interesting in that it's more about the history and the development of this place, of this town, and of this boy's apprenticeship. The Highest House, IDW, there were sketch variants. There's one for issue 2. They had these in cover price boxes. This Ghost Rider in the Midnight Suns Marvel Age special. I don't know if they had a lot of these Marvel Age specials back in the day. I never really saw any of the oversized ones. I don't think this is super rare or super hard to find, but something that's probably on the public radar again with everything that's going on with the Blade and Damien Hellstrom. And speaking of Damien Hellstrom, recently we've seen a lot of little one-shot reveals of this new Ruthless team that's coming about, and it has Damien Hellstrom, and it has Spectrum, or whatever they're calling Monica these days, and a couple of other really interesting characters put together. Wiccan, Blade, and it says sort of like no mercy, no rules, something like that. So I thought they, I know they already have the Savage Avengers out. I got thinking about Next Wave a little with Monica sort of leading. Wouldn't that be cool to see that book come back? Speaking about series that should be looked at. But anyway, I got off track. I also grab a lot of these sort of sci-fi magazines. This is Eclipse magazine, and you can sort of see this cover, and it's like that perfect sort of fantasy, barbarian, Viking, and this had Starlin, and this had a lot of the great sci-fi writers of the day put this book together. One thing that I really love when I'm finding some of these bigger books, and some of these, this was I believe this was Paul Gulacy, who I think was one of the English sort of fantasy illustrators, and he's done a lot of comics. I found a nice Frazetta cover as well on this Quest Star 1, and Frazetta, of course, just had that multi-million-dollar painting sell, but you can find sometimes these Frazetta covers. There was also on the back, they had this creepy cover, and there are always sort of these cool painting style magazines. I don't think you're ever going to get rich on these, but again, there are collectors of Frazetta. There are a lot of great fantasy covers out there with some of these preeminent artists whose work is starting to come more in the public eye. It's becoming more accepted, I guess. So it's well worthwhile going through magazine boxes when you're out there, and it's worth digging back through your long boxes. As I always say, there are no really dollar boxes anymore. I was going to have a flea market the other day and put these boxes out, and I said, wait a minute, that's a first appearance. That's a first appearance. So you never know what's going to pop anymore. So go through your books, go through some of those piles that maybe you put away a year or two ago, and you might find some treasure buried deep within there. But this was our first installment of the Underground DeSPECtive. Please join us on our MeWe page as well. If you like, give a thumbs up, and subscribe if you want to keep seeing some more work of the Underground DeSPECtive. Thank you.